I hate Absol. Hate them with a passion. Not because of what they are, but what they stand for. My whole life I've been seeing them. Rather. It's actually just one. Every time I see it, everyone I care about dies. I saw the Absol for the first time when I was only 6 years old. My mother and I were taking a walk in the woods near our house. It was a large forest, and it had all sorts of small Pokemon in it. Seedot, Oddish, Zigzagoon, Tailo, a few Poochyena, and even the occasional Marill. I loved walking in those woods with my mother and seeing all those little creatures run about. My mother always brought her Lanoon, Breeze, to walk alongside us in case we were ever attacked, but we never were. Breeze was a quiet, gentle creature, and very kind to me and my brother and sister. She never got upset when we spilled juice on her, or bit us when we might have pulled her hair by accident. She was always calm and relaxed. That day, when we were walking through those woods, everything was still and quiet. We haven't seen any of the usual Pokemon. All of a sudden, Breeze curled up into a tiny ball and started growling and whimpering, pure fear shining in her bright blue eyes. "What's wrong, Breeze?" my other asked, trying to soothe the rattled Lanoon. I followed where Breeze's eyes were pointing, and then I saw it. Perched on a log, directly in the center of a sun-dappled clearing, was an Absol. I didn't know what it was at the time. It looked lighter than air, like the slightest wind might blow it over. It was on its toes, ready to spring up and flee at any moment. My mouth hung open in awe of the strange and beautiful creature. My mother didn't see it. She was too occupied trying to pacify Breeze. I suddenly snapped out of my stupor. "Mama! Mama! A Pokemon! A big white one!" I hollered. My mother sat up. "Where?" I turned around again, pointing a pudgy finger at the clearing. "Right over there." "Where did it go?" The creature had gone. Bree stood up again, barking at the spot where I had been pointing, before tearing off into the woods. "Breeze, no, wait!" my mother cried, before sighing. The Lanoon was gone. "What did the Pokemon look like, Mickey?" "It was big and white and fluffy, and it had big black claws and a black tail and a black horn on its head to match." My mother's hands flew to her mouth, and her eyes widened. "Honey, that was an Absol. We need to get home and call your father." "But Breeze—" "No buts. Breeze is smart. She can find her own way home. We have to go. Now!" Shocked at my mother's abruptness, I meekly let her drag me home by my arm. I didn't know what was going on, but if it had anything to do with my father, it had to be important. My father traveled most of the time and wasn't home very often, but always brought us the nicest gifts when he found time to come home to his family. Soon we were home. My mother raced to the phone, her fingers flying over the buttons as she dialed in the numbers. She was almost completely silent for several long minutes, her ear pressed to the phone with her only sounds being grunts and a few words here and there. She suddenly began to sob. Young as I was, I knew something was wrong, even as she hung up the phone, trying to contain herself. "Mama, what happened to Daddy?" My mother looked up, her eyes red, before hugging me and beginning to sob again. It was then I knew that my father was never coming back. My father had been in Lilycove City, staying at the hotel there. He had been there to visit Mount Pyre and catch some Pokemon indigenous to that area, as well as check out the Safari Zone. However, one night he decided to go for a cruise. The captain of the boat was drunk and ran the ship up the rocks. There were no survivors. All we had to remember my father by was his Myena, Grim, who he had left in the hotel room, and a gift that he had been going to bring back for me. He had caught me my very own Pokemon, a beautiful female Vulpix he had captured on Mount Pyre. I named her Foxfire. It was amazing to finally have my own Pokemon. My brother, Alex, who was 3 years older than me, had his Electrike, Jolt. My sister, Eva, who was 2 years younger than me, had her Skitty, Blush. And now I finally had my own Pokemon, and I felt that in her, in my precious Foxfire, a tiny piece of my father lived on. The second time I saw the Absol was 2 years later when I was 8. I was playing in the backyard with my sister and our Pokemon. Our brother was in the front yard with his Manectric. He'd been asked to keep to the other side of the house because he was training his Pokemon, and Jolt was a good bit stronger than either of our Pokemon. I remember it quite clearly. We had all dressed up in eye patches and bandanas and fake peg legs, even our Pokemon, and we were all pretending to be pirates searching for buried treasure. We were making believe that the occasional bolts of lightning dancing away from the front lawn were an approaching storm, a typical child's game. I was supervising as my loyal Foxfire swapped the deck with her tail when I chanced to look up. Straight ahead of me, not more than 20 feet away, was the Absol. It was the same one from all those years ago. I don't know how I knew, but I did. My Vulpix, noticing that I had stopped giving orders, looked up to see what it was that I was staring at. She saw it too. The beast gave a low, guttural growl of its own name, and suddenly we heard a blood-curdling scream from the front yard, accompanied by a shock of lightning. The Absol fled into the woods. Without missing a beat, I turned to my sister. "Eva, quickly, go get Mama. I'll check on Alex." She nodded dumbly and ran inside the house. In seconds, I was in the front yard, Foxfire at my side. The sight I was met with was a grim one. My brother was pinned under a fallen tree, screaming and trying to struggle away as Jolt vainly tried to lift the wooden colossus off his broken body. "Foxfire, go help Jolt!" I cried. She immediately obeyed, and I ran to my brother to see if I could get him to calm down. As I was doing so, the efforts of my Vulpix and his Manectric were joined by the strength of Breeze and Grim. Yes, Breeze came home that night. She was injured and shaky, and almost fainted, but she was alive. My mother and sister quickly followed, joining us in the front yard. In minutes we had the tree off of him, mainly thanks to Grim's move, Strength. The hospital was called, and Alex was taken away. It didn't look good. 8 broken ribs, a fractured collarbone, his spine and neck were both badly cracked, and both of his legs and his hips were shattered. Apparently, while my brother had been training, he had failed to notice a lightning rod embedded in one of the trees. One of Jolt's attacks had been pulled to it, and the old tree was too weak to remain standing and fell on Alex. The doctors couldn't save him. One of his ribs had punctured his lung, and they couldn't fix him in time to prevent him from drowning in his own blood. He died in the hospital that very night. I had lost my father, and then just 2 years later, my beloved older brother was taken from me. I was there when he died. I stayed at his bedside until the very end. I remember his last words. "You know, it's sad, Mickey. I always thought I'd be a gym leader." For a long time, my brother, my sister, and my dear little Vulpix were my only comfort. I frequently cried myself to sleep holding Foxfire in my arms. I decided to call that Absol Reaper. It seemed an appropriate name for a herald of death. It was another year before Reaper brought his unwelcome presence back into my life. My sister had just left on the school bus. I wasn't going to school that day. I wasn't feeling well, but I can still remember the picture of her smiling and boarding that bus, her Skitty peeking out of her backpack. I was watching the vehicle disappear down the road, waving all the way. And then suddenly, Reaper was there. He was sitting on a rock across the street, watching me. I blinked, my arm frozen in midair, and my blue-gray blanket still clutched tightly around my shoulders. Suddenly, the ground was rocked by a huge explosion. I whipped my head around, staring at the bus. The entire vehicle was in flames, a mushroom cloud of smoke bellowing up from it. I dropped my blanket and began to run down the road, hoping to see if my sister or anyone else was okay. Save them if I had to. I had a fire-type Pokemon. I was used to a burn or two. I was still quite far away when there was a second explosion. This one knocked me off my feet. I fell to the ground, crying, covered in dust and too shocked and upset to get up. Even though I was only 9, I knew that no one could have survived that explosion. I looked back towards the house, trying to see if my mother was coming, but the only thing my mind could register was that Reaper was gone once more. The fire department was called, and the street was filled with firemen for the next 2 hours. Everyone in the bus was killed, as I had thought. Over the next week or two, we had gathered bits and pieces of information, and it was almost a whole month before the town had figured out what had happened. One of the high school jocks, wanting to look cool, had brought a Voltorb on the bus. His sibling had seen him sneaking inside his backpack as he left the house, but for a long time was too scared to say anything. After he had snuck the volatile Pokemon on the bus, he and his friends started taunting it, thinking it was funny. The creature became angry and used his signature move, self-destruct. That was the first explosion. The second explosion was the flames reaching the gas tank. My sister and many of my friends had been killed, and the event scarred the whole town. No one really talked about it, but there was a silent recognition that hung in the air for months, sharing the hurt of the fact that most of us had lost a friend or relative in that tragedy. I became a very solemn child, almost as sorrowful as my mother. I was in great pain, but I can't even imagine what it was like for her, losing her husband and all but one of her children in a short 3 years. My darling Foxfire was my only joy left. She was so sweet, always trying her best to cheer me up and make me laugh. I never did laugh. I was hurting too badly for that, but I made sure that she knew I appreciated her trying. For 3 years, I was solemn. For 3 years, Foxfire did her best to bring me joy. For 3 years, I felt peace. A grim, ugly, empty kind of peace. A peace full of finality, and the kind of feeling you get when you have just had a victory, but at a big cost. But 3 years of peace nonetheless. For 3 years, I thought the death was over. But for 3 years, I was dead wrong. The day was overcast and gloomy. It perfectly suited my mood. Earlier, I had found a box of some of my siblings' things, and so my head was clouded with the sorrow of their deaths. I was walking through the backyard, hoping the fresh air would clear my head a little. Foxfire was trying to cheer me up, as usual. She was doing something particularly funny. She had found an old hat and scarf of my mother's, and was strutting around wearing them like she was a supermodel. It was so cute, and she looked so funny, and she was just trying so hard for me that for the first time in years, I almost felt happy. As we walked by the well, she jumped up on its edge and began to saunter around on 2 legs, pretending it was a catwalk. She looked so comical doing that the edges of my face seemed to crack a little as I finally gave a pained smile. My eyes were watering with the borderline of what were almost tears, but I was ever so slightly smiling. And then I saw him, 2 burning eyes peeking out of the trees surrounding the lawn. It was Reaper. Suddenly, Foxfire began to stumble. She had slipped on a wet patch of moss on the well's edge. I realized what was about to happen and dove for her. "Foxfire, no!" I was half a second too late. My fingers just brushing her tail as she disappeared down the well, hitting the water 10 feet below with a splash. I reacted instantly, dropping the bucket down. "Foxfire, grab the bucket! Get in!" I felt the end of the rope gain weight, but then it was gone for a split second before returning. Then it was gone again. It was a full minute before there was a consistent weight present in the bucket below, but as soon as there was, the splashing was gone. Panic took full control as I pulled the bucket up as fast as I could. In it lay my Vulpix, waterlogged and only barely breathing. She was a fire type. She couldn't handle being in water that long. That and the heavy liquid filling her lungs was quickly killing her. My Foxfire, my precious Pokemon, was dying. I hoisted her out of the bucket, sobbing, and held her lightly to my chest. Foxfire, please, no! Please don't leave me. I need you. You're all I've got left, I begged. Her eyes opened just slightly, looking at me. Please, Foxfire, you can't die. As soon as I finish school, you and me, we were going to go everywhere together. Please, don't go. You can't. I love you. I sobbed, holding her tighter, as if that would keep life in her body. She smiled at me, weakly, and her eyes slid shut again. Her small chest heaved one last time. And then she was gone. And I broke down. Foxfire was all I had left, and now she was gone too. Through my pain and through the endless tears running down my cheeks, I noticed only one thing. The red eyes that had appeared between the trees has disappeared. We buried her in the backyard. I saw to it that she got a good funeral, just as good as any person would have gotten. I brought her flowers, roses to be exact, lots of them. They were her favorite. My mother and I lit all sorts of candles, and we read from the Bible as we lowered her into the hole Breeze had made with Dig. After that, I lost myself. I stole hundreds of packets of cigarettes, and I lost track of my days. My life dissolved into hours upon hours of chain-smoking cigarette after cigarette. I knew that weak lungs ran in my family, but I didn't care that I was killing myself. I had nothing left to live for, and it didn't matter to me if I died of old age or died locked in a smoky, cigarette bud-covered bedroom. Now I am 13. I'm confined to bed with severe blood cancer. I knew this would happen, but I didn't care. I still don't. My mother doesn't care either. She hasn't been right in the head ever since my sister died. She probably won't even notice I'm gone, and if she does, I can only hope she'll respect my wish to die. It hurts to think. It hurts to talk. It hurts to breathe. I'm almost too weak to even type this, but I type it because I don't think I'll be here much longer. And I wanted someone to find this just because I want someone out there to know. I've been refusing the treatments, and the doctors aren't sure how long I have left, but now I have very little time. Why? Reaper just appeared outside of my window. He's staring right at me. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this creepypasta reading. I definitely enjoyed making it. And it was really fun to make, honestly. And it was good to read, and it was good to do something new for the channel. Thing is, I think this is probably what I'm going to start doing with the channel. Like, maybe I'll put a gaming clip here, or maybe a Pokemon Break Bronze video here and there, you know, the casual 30-minute ones. But for the most part, I'm going to be doing story readings for this channel. I'm going to try to upload a video once every week, and if I don't, either something has come up or I got grounded. It was definitely one of those two that kind of delayed the making. So, and I haven't been recording much lately because I've been really busy, and I've had wrestling, so that didn't help out much either. But these videos don't take as long to make. So I'll probably be doing these pretty often, and I'll probably keep a pretty consistent schedule. I'm still deciding when I'm gonna upload every video. I'm probably gonna upload a video every weekend, probably. This is just an exception because I just made this decision. yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Bye.